All right, so are you ready to unlock some serious language learning secrets? Because, you sent us this YouTube video about learning English
Hmm.
and more specifically, how to get started, even if you're feeling a little overwhelmed or maybe just a little motivationally challenged.
Right.
We've all been there.
Absolutely. It's that feeling of, just staring at a blank page, waiting for that expiration to strike.
Yeah,
Except it's instead of a page, it's a whole new language.
I like that analogy, yeah. And so it sounds like this video tackles this head on.
Hmm.
What's the first hurdle it helps you jump over?
Well, it starts with, a pretty relatable scenario. So a student named Jasmine, who is trying to get back into learning English,
Okay.
but is feeling totally stuck. And so the tutors in the video really emphasizes that, before diving into grammar rules or vocabulary lists,
Right.
you need to define your why.
I see. So it's not just about what you want to learn,
Exactly.
but why you want to learn it.
Exactly.
That seems like it could be a game changer for motivation. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little?
Yeah. So think of it this way.
Yeah.
If you're learning English to travel the world, your focus is going to be a lot different than someone who needs it for, professional reasons,
Right.
work presentations.
Right.
And so having a clear why, it gives your learning a purpose.
So it's almost like having this compass
Mm-hmm.
that's pointing you in the right direction from the very beginning
Yeah.
so that you don't feel lost in the sea of resources.
Absolutely.
What's next?
So then the video tackles the classic overwhelm
Okay.
that comes with, starting anything new.
Right.
There's just this feeling that you need to master everything at once.
Yeah.
And the tutor really encourages Jasmine and you, the viewer watching, to embrace the power of small goals.
Okay. I like that. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah. So instead of aiming to learn 1,000 words right away,
Right.
why not just start by learning, 10 useful phrases each week? Or practice a simple self-introduction until you can do it, without breaking a sweat.
So it's about breaking down these huge, daunting goals into more manageable chunks.
Yeah,
I like it.
absolutely.
Is there a psychological reason why this works so well?
Yeah, there's a lot of research on how, small wins actually trigger the release of dopamine in the brain,
Oh, wow.
which reinforces positive feelings and motivates you to keep going.
So it's like giving yourself a little reward each time you hit a mini milestone.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
But what about vocabulary?
Mm.
The video mentions that too, right?
Yes, it makes a really interesting point about learning phrases, not just isolated words.
Oh, okay. Could you give me an example of what you mean?
Yeah, so instead of just memorizing the word book,
Right,
wouldn't it be more useful to learn the phrase, can I borrow a book?
right.
So right away, you're learning, how words function in context.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like learning the language in action rather than just a bunch of disconnected puzzle pieces.
Exactly.
And speaking of making connections, the video mentions something kind of surprising about the number of words you actually need to understand English.
Right. It says that you only need about 1,000 words to understand 85% of everyday English.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's a lot less daunting, I think, than a lot of people would think.
Yeah, for sure. So even with a relatively small vocabulary, you can start understanding a lot of what you hear and read.
Mm-hmm.
But what about actually speaking?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a whole other challenge? Yeah, speaking is definitely where I think a lot of people kind of get tripped up.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the words, but like actually using them in real time
Right.
can be a whole different ballgame.
For sure.
So what does the video suggest for overcoming that fear?
Well, it highlights the importance of listening
Okay.
and how it's just as crucial as speak. It suggests starting with short listening sessions, maybe just like 10 to 15 minutes a day.
So instead of jumping into a conversation right away,
Exactly.
you're training your ear to pick up the rhythm and sounds of the language. I like that approach.
Yeah.
What kind of listening material does it recommend?
Well, it mentions watching videos with subtitles,
Okay.
which can be a really great way to connect the spoken words with the written form.
Right.
But even listening to music or podcasts in English can help you get comfortable with the flow of the language.
Well, if you're listening to podcasts, you're already ahead of the game.
Exactly.
But for those just starting out, are there any specific types of podcasts or videos that might be easier to digest?
That's a great question, and yes, there are.
Okay.
For beginners, podcasts or videos with clear pronunciation and slower speaking paces are ideal.
Okay.
And think about topics you're already interested in,
Right.
whether it's cooking or sports or true crime.
All right.
You'll be more engaged, and you'll also pick up vocabulary related to your hobbies.
Yeah, so you're learning while you're enjoying something you already love.
Exactly.
That's a win-win.
For sure.
The video also talks about finding a language partner.
Yes.
I imagine that could also help with the speaking jitters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Having someone to practice with, either online or in person can make a huge difference.
Right.
And the video really emphasizes that it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about getting comfortable with making mistakes and learning from them.
And I think that's such an important point.
Yes.
We often put so much pressure on ourselves to speak flawlessly.
Absolutely.
But the truth is, even native speakers make mistakes.
All the time.
All the time. Yeah, it's all part of the learning process.
Exactly.
Did the video mention anything about staying motivated when those inevitable dips in enthusiasm kind of hit?
It did, and ties back to what we talked about earlier about small goals and finding your why. So when you feel that motivation waning,
Yeah.
remind yourself why you started learning English in the first place.
Right. That's great advice.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day that we forget the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
But beyond that, are there any practical tips for kind of reinvigorating that passion?
Yeah, the video suggests incorporating English into your daily routine in fun and creative ways.
Yeah.
So maybe you could watch a movie in English with subtitles.
Right.
Or try cooking a recipe from an English language website. Or even just spend a few minutes browsing social media in English.
So it's about finding ways to make English a natural part of your life.
Exactly.
Rather than just the separate chore. Did it give any specific examples of activities
It did.
that could help with this?
One suggestion was to use a language learning app, which can be a really fun way to gamify your learning and track your progress.
Right.
There are also tons of online communities dedicated to language learning where you can connect with other learners, share tips, motivate each other.
Having that sense of community, I think, can definitely make a big difference,
For sure.
especially on those days when you're feeling less than inspired.
Absolutely.
Did the video talk about the role of active learning in language acquisition?
Yes, it did. It stressed that simply memorizing words or grammar rules isn't enough.
Right.
You need to actively use the language to make it stick.
So what are some examples of active learning techniques that it recommends?
Well, one suggestion was to try using new words or phrases at the end of each day,
Okay.
even if it's just in a simple conversation with yourself.
Okay.
You could also write a short journal entry in English, or even record yourself speaking.
Those are all great ideas.
Yeah,
So it's like turning everyday moments into opportunities to practice.
exactly.
Did it mention anything about breaking down your learning into like specific chunks of time?
It did. It actually gave a really specific example.
Okay.
Learn 3 new words in the morning,
Uh-huh.
listen to a short conversation in the afternoon, and then try using those new words or phrases at the end of the day.
That's a really great way to make language learning feel more manageable and less overwhelming. It's about consistency rather than cramming.
Exactly. And the video emphasized that even just 10 to 15 minutes of focused practice each day
Right.
can add up to significant progress over time.
Yeah. We often underestimate the power of those small, consistent efforts,
For sure.
but they can really make all the difference. Did the video touch upon any other anxieties or roadblocks that learners might encounter?
Yeah, it did. And it touches on something that I think we all struggle with, just that feeling of losing motivation or hitting a plateau.
Right.
What are some of the suggestions for getting past those hurdles?
Well, it circles back to that idea of simplifying.
Okay.
Remember those small habits we talked about?
Yeah.
Those are key to staying on track when you start to feel overwhelmed.
So instead of trying to do everything at once, just focus on those bite-sized actions
Exactly.
you can consistently achieve. That makes a lot of sense.
What if you're really feeling stuck, though?
The video emphasized that it's okay to ask for help, whether it's finding a tutor or joining a language exchange group,
Right.
or even just reaching out to a friend who speaks English.
Right.
Don't be afraid to seek support.
It's so easy to feel like you have to go it alone, but having that network of support can really make a huge difference.
Absolutely, and it ties back to that sense of community we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
Learning a language doesn't have to be a solitary pursuit.
Right.
Connecting with others can make the journey a lot more enjoyable and can also help keep you accountable.
That's a great point. So to sum up, what are the key takeaways that you would say our listeners should walk away with today?
First and foremost, don't let fear or overwhelm hold you back. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start.
Right.
And remember, start small, focus on those manageable goals, like learning a few phrases each day or listening to a short English podcast.
And don't forget, the power of consistency, those small efforts really do add up over time.
Absolutely. And most importantly, make it fun.
Yeah.
Find ways to integrate English into your daily life in ways that you enjoy, whether it's through music or movies or connecting with other learners.
I love how the video reminds us that every expert was once a beginner.
Yeah,
It's so encouraging to remember that everyone starts somewhere.
it really does put things into perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And with the right approach, you can achieve fluency.
Absolutely.
You got this now. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listener with a little something to ponder. If you could only learn 10 English phrases to kind of kickstart your journey,
Mm-hmm.
what would they be?
That's a great question. It really forces you to think about, the most essential building blocks of communication. We'd love to hear what our listener comes up with.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the world of English language learning. We hope this has given you the tools and the motivation to get started on your own journey.
Remember, every step you take brings you closer to fluency.
Until next time, happy learning.